Steam billowed from the pristine kitchen of LeBlanc, downtown Manhattan's newest luxury restaurant, as executive chef Marcus Sterling wiped his brow. The gleaming Michelin pin on his chef's coat caught the light, a reminder of the 12 years he'd spent earning his reputation across 3 continents. Tonight, though, he wasn't here as a chef. He was here as a secret Michelin inspector. The restaurant's owner, Bradley Crawford III, strutted through his dining room in a tailored Italian suit, stopping to berate a young black sous chef who was plating an intricate dessert. "No, no, no!" Crawford's voice echoed across the marble floors. "This isn't some soul food kitchen. These are paying customers." He snatched the plate, smashing it into the trash. $200 worth of carefully crafted dessert destroyed in an instant. The sous chef, James Washington, remained stoic, his knife-scarred hands, bearing the marks of 15 years in elite kitchens, steadied as he reached for another plate. "Mr. Crawford, that plating was identical to our standard." "Standard?" Crawford sneered, his face reddening. "You've been here 3 weeks and suddenly you're an expert. Maybe you should stick to cooking chicken and waffles." The dining room fell silent. Customers lowered their forks, uncomfortable witnesses to the unfolding scene. At his corner table, Chef Sterling's hand tightened around his wine glass, his cover as a food critic giving him a front-row seat to this disgrace. "Sir," James replied calmly, "I trained at Le Cordon Bleu. I've worked in 3-star restaurants across—" "I don't care if you cooked for the Queen of England," Crawford spat. "You clearly don't understand the level of excellence we maintain here. You're fired. Get out of my kitchen." James slowly untied his apron. The other kitchen staff watched in shocked silence, their own hands trembling as they continued cooking. "Mr. Crawford," he said quietly, "you might want to reconsider this decision." Crawford laughed, sharp and cruel. "Or what? You'll write a bad review on Yelp? Security?" He snapped his fingers at the restaurant's guard. "Escort this man out and check his bag. These people tend to get sticky fingers when they're angry." The racial undertone wasn't lost on anyone. Several diners pushed their plates away, disgusted. A woman at table 6 was already typing furiously on her phone, no doubt sharing the incident on social media. That's when Chef Sterling stood up, his chair scraping against the floor with deliberate slowness. The Michelin pin on his lapel caught the light again, drawing every eye in the room. "I believe," he said, his voice carrying the weight of 2 decades in the world's finest kitchens, "that's quite enough." Crawford turned, irritation flashing across his face. "Sir, please return to your meal. This is an internal matter." "An internal matter?" Chef Sterling's laugh was low and dangerous. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a small red book that made Crawford's face go pale. The Michelin Guide. "I'd say publicly humiliating one of Europe's most decorated sous chefs is very much an external matter." The security guard, who had been moving toward James, froze mid-step. Diners reached for their phones, sensing something massive was about to unfold. What are you talking about?" Crawford stammered, his earlier bravado evaporating. Sterling walked forward, each step measured and deliberate. James Washington, graduate of Le Cordon Bleu, former executive chef at La Maison d'Or in Paris, 2 Michelin stars under his leadership. Previously sous chef at the Golden Pearl in Tokyo, 3 Michelin stars. He paused, letting each achievement land like a blow. And currently, one of our most respected Michelin inspectors in training. The room erupted in gasps. A wine glass shattered somewhere in the stunned silence that followed. James stood tall, no longer the humble sous chef, but every inch the culinary master he was. "You see, Mr. Crawford," Sterling continued, "we don't just review the food. We assess the entire restaurant experience, the culture, the leadership." His voice hardened. "The treatment of staff." Crawford's face had gone from red to ash white. I didn't know." Clearly, James spoke up, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who no longer needed to prove himself. "You didn't know that before working here. I was planning the menu for a 3-star restaurant in Lyon. You didn't know that I've trained over 30 chefs who now run their own Michelin-starred restaurants." He gestured to the dessert in the trash. That plating technique? I created it. It's being taught at Le Cordon Bleu as we speak. The kitchen staff had abandoned all pretense of cooking, watching the scene unfold with a mixture of horror and satisfaction. One of the line cooks was quietly crying, tears of relief perhaps, at seeing justice served. Sterling opened the Michelin Guide, pulling out his official credentials. Mr. Crawford, this inspection was meant to be conducted over several visits. However, I've seen everything I need to see. He turned to the dining room. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize, but this establishment will be noted in our guide as not recommended due to discriminatory practices and hostile work environment. The impact was immediate. Diners began standing up, leaving cash and credit cards on their tables, eager to distance themselves from the scandal. Crawford stumbled backward, gripping a chair for support. You can't do this, he whispered. We can and we will, Sterling replied. The Michelin Guide has always stood for excellence, not just in food, but in character, in dignity. He turned to James. Chef Washington, I believe you're still consulting for Le Bernardin? Perhaps it's time you took that executive chef position they offered. James smiled slightly, removing his chef's coat. I believe you're right, Chef Sterling. He placed the coat on the counter next to the destroyed dessert. Mr. Crawford, that recipe you just threw away? It won Best Dessert at the International Culinary Olympics. Feel free to fish it out of the trash. It's the closest you'll ever get to a Michelin star. As James and Sterling walked toward the door, the kitchen staff began removing their aprons one by one. The line cook who had been crying stepped forward first, then others followed. Within minutes, Crawford stood alone in his empty kitchen, surrounded by half-finished meals and abandoned stations. Outside, as police lights flashed in the distance, someone had called them during Crawford's racist security check demand, Sterling turned to James. You knew this was an inspection. James straightened his tie, a small smile playing at his lips. I had a suspicion when I saw your pin. Decided to let things play out naturally. He glanced back at the restaurant. Some lessons can't be taught in culinary school. Sterling nodded, pulling out his phone. I'm calling Jean-Georges. He's been looking for a chef to head his new restaurant. He paused, looking at James. Unless you prefer to join the inspection team permanently, we could use someone with your perspective. Above them, the LeBlanc sign flickered once, then went dark, as if even the electricity had decided to abandon Crawford's sinking ship. Inside, they could see him slumped at the bar, holding the crumpled pages of his ruined dream. You know, James said thoughtfully, maybe I'll do both. Someone needs to make sure the next Bradley Crawford learns his lesson before he gets his hands on a restaurant. As they walked away, their phones buzzed continuously with notifications. The video was already going viral. Racist restaurant owner learns his soul food chef is actually... Sometimes justice is best served on a silver platter.